All right, this chapter 6 is called Watch Like a Shock. After lunch, Mrs. Shock began talking about endangered animals. Amelia Bedelia took a big risk by peeking at her notebook at the list she had made of cool animals for her zoo. List of animals. She's got all of the different kinds. And remember, she told Roger he couldn't bring his deer head, so on the list she marked out deer head. She still felt bad about turning down Roger's deer head. She knew that zoologists and scientists often studied stuffed animals from long ago. Then she remembered that last year, Roger had brought a beautiful lizard for show and tell. It was green with gold spots and bright blue eyelids around its eyelids. Amelia Bedelia made sure that Mrs. Shock wasn't looking and wrote Roger a note. It said, "Dear Roger, please bring your amazing lizard over to my house. I'll put it in my zoo. Sorry about the deer. Amelia Bedelia." She folded the note into a tiny square, wrote Roger on the outside, and passed it to Penny, just as Mrs. Shock looked up. Beep! Very quietly and very carefully, the note was passed from student to student until it reached Roger. Remember that beep is the code that the students have put together to warn each other when they're about to get in trouble, like a predator? Mrs. Shock was talking about polar bears when Amelia Bedelia got her answer. "In a few years," said Mrs. Shock, "polar bears might go extinct." "No, I don't believe it," blurted out Amelia Bedelia. The entire class stared at her. "You disagree, Amelia Bedelia?" said Mrs. Shock. "What if an animal disappears?" "That's okay," said Amelia Bedelia. "If their coats or skins let them blend in, that protects them." "You're getting ahead of us," said Mrs. Shock. "We'll talk about natural camouflage next." What Amelia Bedelia had not believed was the answer to her note. "Amelia Bedelia, my lizard was a gecko." Oops, can you see that? "But he died. Roger." Amelia Bedelia wrote back, "Roger, I'm sorry." Amelia Bedelia. And then she made a little sad face. I have to look over the book. There it is. There, I can see you. When Mrs. Shock turned toward the board, Amelia Bedelia held out the note to Penny, but Penny didn't take it. Amelia Bedelia looked at her. Beep! Penny was staring straight ahead and ignoring Amelia Bedelia in the note. Beep! Amelia Bedelia had forgotten the first rule of passing a note at school. Never take your eyes off the teacher. But it was too late. What's happening with the picture? There, you can see Amelia Bedelia. And look at that hand coming up from her, from the top. Amelia Bedelia looked up at Mrs. Shock and froze like a baby bunny in an open field. The hawk came swooping down the aisle. Gleaming red talons plucked the note out of Amelia Bedelia's hand. "I'll take this, young lady, and I'll see you after school." Looking at the rest of the class, she added, "And if I hear one more beep out of anyone while I am teaching, you will all join Amelia Bedelia." "Amelia Bedelia," Mrs. Shock said at the end of the day, "I am so disappointed. You're usually so considerate. You pay attention, you ask good questions. Now you're drawing plans for a zoo and passing notes." "After I missed the trip to the zoo," said Amelia Bedelia, "I just wanted to do something fun with my class and animals." Tears welled up in Amelia Bedelia's eyes. "I see," said Mrs. Shock. "How's it going? Are you making progress?" Amelia Bedelia thought for a few seconds. Then she said, "Pretty good, but it isn't easy to make an interesting zoo, especially if you can't have the type of animals that you can eat." Look, there's Amelia Bedelia and Mrs. Shock after school. Mrs. Shock laughed and Amelia Bedelia smiled back. "You know," said Mrs. Shock, "I've been to lots of zoos all over the world and I've seen thousands of animals." "I'd love that," said Amelia Bedelia. "It's fun to see them," said Mrs. Shock, "but I've always wondered what it would like to be them." "That's more interesting," said Amelia Bedelia. Mrs. Shock nodded. "Pay more attention in class, and you might get an idea for your zoo." She handed the note back to Amelia Bedelia. "I promise," said Amelia Bedelia. In my class, said Mrs. Shock, you can keep your head in the clouds as long as your feet are on the ground. Look at Mrs. Shock. What's she put here? There's Amelia Bedelia, and her head's in the cloud, and her feet are on the ground. Look how tall she is in that picture. That's a phrase, when somebody says your head is in the clouds, it doesn't mean that your head is actually in the clouds. It means that you're dreaming about things. And you're not really putting your feet on the ground, even though they are. Having your feet on the ground means you're thinking clearly. You're not dreaming. You're seeing everything in front of you and you know exactly what you have to do. But Amelia Bedelia thought it meant she was actually in the clouds. Ooh, I like this page. Look, these are clouds. Amelia Bedelia is, where is Amelia Bedelia? There's Amelia Bedelia. Man, and she's dreaming. And look, her head is in the clouds. Can you see anything in these clouds? You can't really see. Today they're just flat clouds, so it's kind of gray. But Amelia Bedelia is seeing pictures in the clouds. Getting in trouble and staying after school meant that Amelia Bedelia missed her bus, so her feet were definitely on the ground. Ooh, excuse me. It's early, and I haven't had coffee. As she waited on the bench out front for her mother to pick her up, she thought about her zoo, her friends, and what Mrs. Shock had said. She looked up at the sky. She could never look at clouds without seeing animals in them. Today she spotted an entire zoo overhead. A hippopotamus drifted by a rhinoceros chasing a cheetah away from a gazelle. They raced around a huge cloud that didn't have much shape. It was rounded on top and flat on the bottom, like a giant tortoise with its head and legs tucked inside its shell. No, wait a second. Amelia Bedelia couldn't believe it. It was a pie in the sky. She pointed at it, but no one was around to share it with her. Suddenly it changed into a lizard and scampered away. If there can be a pie in the sky, Amelia Bedelia said, then there can be a zoo in my backyard. She's right, but she's got her head in the clouds, right? Leaping lizards, a glacial gecko. This is chapter 7. Look at him. A glacial gecko means, so glacial means cold, and a gecko is a lizard, right? So look at that lizard. He's got a cup of coffee and some mittens. Weird. When Amelia Bedelia finally got home, Roger was already waiting. Sitting on the doorstep next to him was a plastic cooler. You didn't have to bring your own refreshments, said Amelia Bedelia. We have cold drinks. Amelia Bedelia's right, said her mother, laughing. I'll go make you some lemonade. Roger stared at Amelia Bedelia and patted the top of the cooler. Georgie is in here, he whispered. Amelia Bedelia felt creeped out and curious. Why would Roger bring a dead gecko over to her house? Don't worry, said Roger. Georgie doesn't stink. He's frozen solid. Do you remember that Roger passed him a note? Passed Amelia Bedelia a note that said his gecko died? I think his gecko's name was Georgie. I think the dead gecko might be in the cooler. Ugh. Then he told Amelia Bedelia how his little brother had let Georgie out of his terrarium to show some friends. Georgie had disappeared, and they found him flattened under a cushion in the sofa. It was winter, and the ground was too frozen to bury him. So they put him in a plastic bag and stuck him in the freezer until the ground thawed, and he could have a proper burial. Georgie died 5 months ago, said Roger. I had pretty much forgotten about him until I got your note. Would you like to see him? Amelia Bedelia nodded, so Roger opened the cooler, pushed aside an ice pack, and held up the gecko. Georgie was in a plastic bag, and he was flattened out like he had been run over. So there they are. Can you see him? Georgie, the flat lizard, the flat frozen lizard is right there. Amelia Bedelia was fascinated. She didn't notice Clay coming up the walk. Cool, he said. What's that? It's more than cool, said Amelia Bedelia. It's frozen. It's Georgie, said Roger. I never got a chance to bury him. He's a gold dust day gecko from Madagascar. And then there's a picture of Georgie before he was squished. Much better. Amelia Bedelia didn't know what to do. She had imagined having a zoo, not a museum. "This is amazing," said Clay. "We can make a sign that says he's a reptile, and that even though the word dinosaur means terrible lizard, he's not a dinosaur. We can say Georgie is an ancient lizard that fell into a glacier and was perfectly preserved to this very day." "We can write that he liked to eat all kinds of insects and bugs," said Roger. "Even the flu?" said Amelia Bedelia, "because that would be great." "Let's freeze him in a block of ice," said Clay. "He'll be the main attraction." "I'll put him in our bird bath," said Amelia Bedelia. She was beginning to see the possibilities in this idea. "Georgie will be on a pedestal, and it can hold the melting water." Roger looked relieved. "Once he thaws, we can bury him." "Absolutely," said Amelia Bedelia. So look at Amelia Bedelia, picturing Georgie standing on a pedestal. That is a pedestal. It's kind of like a elevated stair or a little shelf that somebody sits on above everybody else so that they look important. Roger looked relieved. Nope, I already read that. Amelia Bedelia, Clay, and Roger sneaked Georgie into the kitchen. They were about to fill the plastic bag with water when they heard Amelia Bedelia's mother coming. They resealed it and tucked it into the back of the freezer behind a bag of frozen peas. Look you can see in the kitchen area. Let's see. And if you look right behind, right there, you can just see Georgie's head sticking up. This does not sound like it's going to turn out well. That night, everything for dinner was fresh, so the freezer door stayed shut. Amelia Bedelia had already told her mother why she had to stay late at school, but during dessert, she told her father too. "You want to build a zoo?" asked her father. "With real animals?" "Just pets," she replied. "Like Finally." Remember, Finally is her dog. "And Joy has a rabbit and Penny has a mouse. Lots of kids in my class have pets. Plus, we'll probably use some stuffed animals. You started to tell me this the other day, didn't you?" "So that's why the snake was in our backyard," said her mother. "A snake in our backyard?" Amelia Bedelia's father said. "Forget it." "Oh, Daddy, please," said Amelia Bedelia. "It's a really big idea. We'll have games and rides, too." "Sweetie," he said, "building a zoo is complicated. It would be different if you had done some planning." Amelia Bedelia excused herself and ran to her bedroom. She returned with her notebook. She showed her parents her plan for the zoo. It included everything, from the rope swing entrance to the bird bath glacier display. All of the animals and exhibits were organized into habitats. Okay, so it's going to take a minute. You're going to have to really look at Amelia Bedelia's zoo because it got so much more detailed. Look at all of the things. There are fountains. There an animal exhibit. Oh, sorry, be an animal exhibit. So remember, she was talking to her teacher, and her teacher said, "I wonder what it's like to be an animal." It looks like Amelia Bedelia's made a space for that. Then over here, she's even made plans for where her house is, her garage, the fountain area. Oh my gosh. This is the house, so this is where they come out. See that? See it in maps, when you have a door that opens, it's a little stick with a little curved line. This is the way that Amelia Bedelia leaves her house, because this is her house area, and comes out this way. There's rope swings. My gosh, there's a lot. She's been planning. Amelia Bedelia's parents looked at the map, at each other, then at Amelia Bedelia. "So," said her father, smiling, "when I fell into your wading pool, it was actually a crocodile-infested river?" "Uh-huh," said Amelia Bedelia. "Sorry." "And my herb garden will be home to a big cat?" asked her mother. "Yep, but it never moves," said Amelia Bedelia. "It won't bother anything." Her father shrugged. "Looks harmless enough, I suppose." "And you did a great job of planning," said her mother. "Let us sleep on it, and we'll let you know in the morning." Here they are looking at Amelia Bedelia's stuff. And look, Her dad has his arms crossed, but he doesn't look like he's really angry. He's just thinking. They're very proud of her. Amelia Bedelia just handed her notebook to her mother. "Just don't sleep on it too much," she said. "If it gets wrinkled, I'll have to do it over." They didn't really mean sleep on the book. They meant, let's take what you just told me. I'm going to go to sleep, and then I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to think about it some more. That's a really great way to make decisions, without making fast decisions. Amelia Bedelia put on her pajamas and kissed her parents goodnight. She lay in bed, looking at the sweet squirrel monkey perched on her windowsill. She loved her gift, and she felt really lucky to have such good friends at school. Hey, my husband, Barry, just brought me breakfast. You want to say hi? I'm reading. There he is.
Hey guys, let's go. Bagels and cream cheese.
Bagels, yummy. She could just see the reflection of the monkey in the glass. 2 monkeys are better than 1, she thought. Look at that. Can you see? So here's the monkey that she got from her friends, her classmates. But the reflection in the window makes it look like 2. She has a cool room, doesn't she? I guess that's a beanbag. She was about to turn off her lamp when she noticed that her monkey had lost his reflection. That's odd, she thought. Then Amelia Bedelia's own animal instinct kicked in. She got out of bed and rummaged through her backpack. Where was that extra banana her mother always packed? Got it. She raised her window and set the banana on the ledge. Leaves rustled in a nearby tree as she closed the window. Back in bed, Amelia Bedelia whispered, "Good night, little monkey." All right, so the next chapter that we're going to read is Pet Peeved, but you have to wait till next time.